Thank you. Hi, everyone. First, apologies, my voice. I'm recovering from a cold, and as you can see, my voice is kind of not back yet. It's nice to be here with you. My name is Jeje Mohamed. I am the Senior Manager for Digital Safety and Free Expression at PEN. And I come from a background in journalism covering human rights abuses and then shifting into the safety and security field. If you can write in the chat, if you can introduce yourselves, what brought you here, what is one thing you would like to learn from today, that would be great. And this is not a lecture, it's a conversation. Like I'm gonna go over some slides, but it's very helpful if I can hear from you, your experiences, and we can share together. So this is a roadmap for today. The first thing we're going to be talking about is some definitions. What is online abuse? Some of the tactics used, some of the context and the impact that it has on us. Then we're going to go over some preparation, some simple digital security 101. Nothing too complicated, nothing too technical, but are some stuff that we can do on our daily basis that would help us tighten our security and mitigate any, like a lot of the damage that can happen. Then we're going to discuss response. What are some of the tools and features existing within platforms that can help us navigate when we are in the middle of an online abuse attack? Then how can we offer support and be allies, and at the same time, while taking care of ourselves and our mental health? These are some conversation agreements. This is a space for learning and sharing. So anything, skills or information you learn here, please go ahead and share it with everyone you know. But if anyone shares sensitive stories or things about themselves, we would request that this would be confidential. It is important to recognize our own and each other's experiences, as online abuse does not affect us all the same way or for the same reasons. Some people are targeted because of the work that they do. Some people are targeted because of their identities. Then it's a space it's a place to take space and give space and open in a good faith conversation. And please take care of yourself, as we cannot really talk about online abuse without discussing the bad things that happen, and it can be triggering or re-traumatizing for someone. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you can mention in the chat what brings you here today to learn more about online self-defense, how can I utilize it? What the limits are of how to engage with people online to correct misinformation. Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Now, to start with definitions, the way we define online abuse at PEN America is that it's the repeated or severe targeting of an individual or group online through harmful behavior. And there are a couple of things about this definition. When we talk about severe, it can be one incident only that someone struggles with in their career, for example, but it has really terrifying consequences. Like, for example, someone publishing my home address and asking others to harm me, which is doxing. This can be only one thing, but it's really, really terrifying. And when we talk about repeated, we talk about the volume. So incidents on their own might not really be annoying for you, but because of the amount of things that you're receiving, that counts as abuse. For example, someone targeting my phone and sending me hundreds and hundreds of texts in a day to the point that I lose access to my device, that also counts as abuse. And it is very, very important to keep both in mind, that it doesn't have that things don't have to escalate to the level of doxing for it to be counted as abuse. These are some of the tactics that are relevant for the training. These are not all of the tactics because they develop every day, but these are some of them. The first one is hateful speech. What we mean by that, it's kind of self-explanatory, but it's like speech that targets someone's identity or perceived identities. That can be race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexuality, disability, or anything that people can perceive as an identity. And of course, unfortunately, the more layers of identity someone has, the more likely they are to be targeted online. Another thing is threats. When we talk about threats, we talk about threats of physical or sexual violence, and it is intended to instill fear and intimidate the target. When it comes to threats of of sexual violence, we see it unfortunately targeting more and more women and non-binary individuals. Then we talk about cyber mobs, and with cyber mobs, they're coordinated attacks by a group of abusers and intended to overwhelm the person. Sometimes they seem like they're random, but they're really like connected to each other and they are coordinated. Then we talk about doxing, and with doxing, it's the publishing of sensitive personal information, as I mentioned in the definition, online to instigate abuse, intimidate, extort, or steal identity. Sensitive information can be something like your home address, something like your personal phone number, your personal email, sometimes personal photos, the school where someone's kids go to, and it's all to threaten someone and to silence them. Other tactics that we see are also online impersonation, and we're seeing that this is increasing a lot, specifically with things that are happening like for Twitter, X now, of verification and all of these problems, which is someone creating a fake account using your photo, using your name, pretending to be you, publishing inflammatory statements or problematic things to discredit you, to defame you, or to get you fired. Then we have message bombing. Again, this is what I mentioned in the definition. It's flooding someone's phone, like device or account, with so many things to disrupt use or access. We see this tactic being used when someone is trying to hack an account. And like when like someone's trying to hack an account and they send you a message, there is an unauthorized access, or someone is trying to log into your account from this geographical area which you don't live in. This is a tactic to bury that email or that notification so that you don't see it. Then we have non-consensual intimate images, and it is the distribution of private or manufactured sexually explicit images or videos without consent. Again, it targets a lot of women and non-binary individuals, and it is to discredit or defame someone. Then we talk about gendered disinformation, and it is spreading deceptive or inaccurate information, and it is based on or to undermine a person, and it is based on their gender. So they're targeting them because of their gender. Now, before I talk about the magnitude, I want to make sure I'm checking the chat. Oh, I like this. Someone is interested to learn how to support staff who are involved in harmful situations online, and we run virtual events. I understand it's increasing, unfortunately. So, to talk about the magnitude or the scope of online abuse, this study was done by YouGov and ADL, and it shows a comparison between they surveyed Americans to see who has experienced online abuse. And the survey of 2023 says that 52% of respondents have said that they've experienced online harassment, compared to 40% last year in 2022. And 37% said that they've experienced severe harassment, compared to 27% of 2022. So it is increasing, and it's really becoming more scary by the year. The thing is, not everyone is targeted the same way or equally. Here, the survey shows that people from specific backgrounds and identities are targeted more. Black Americans are targeted more by online abuse. Like Muslim Americans as well, Muslims are targeted a lot by online abuse. And here you can see that people from the LGBT community, and specifically transgender people, unfortunately were the highest to be targeted in 2023 with online abuse and harassment. This is another study that was done by ICFJ and UNESCO, and they've surveyed women journalists globally. And 73% of respondents have said that they have experienced online violence in the course of their work. And the reason why we do this work from a free expression organization, which is PEN America is a nonprofit that celebrates and defends the written word internationally and in the US. And the reason we're doing this work is that a lot of our constituents have raised concerns that online harassment is making it harder for them to do their work. And this survey affirms the same thing, is that 20% of people, for example, who have said, of women who have said that they've experienced online abuse, said that they've experienced offline violence in relation to the online abuse that they've experienced. 38% said that they made themselves less visible. 30% said that they self censored on social media. And 13% said that they received threats of violence against those close to them. So, as we can see, online abuse affects a lot of things. It threatens freedom of expression, threatens also the free press that we're having or trying to sustain. And this is why we created this resource, the Online Harassment Field Manual, which is a holistic resource that can help anyone navigate online abuse, whether they are on the receiving end, whether they want to support someone, they witness someone struggling with online abuse and they want support to support them, or they are an employer. Now, this is a scenario, so I will like and need your participation with it. A reporter you know posts a message stating that several people have created impersonation accounts on Twitter using his name and photograph. His post sounds alarmed. He says the impersonation accounts are tweeting homophobic slurs and anti Semitic images, and he does not know what to do. What can you do to support him and be an ally? Feel free to write in the chat or unmute. Also, there is no wrong answers actually. So if you see this is happening, report the fake accounts, yes. Reporting the fake accounts are very important. Very, very good. Ask what support will be helpful to him. Very, very, very important. Offer to make a post as well that advises of the impersonation. Yes. All of these are really, really, really good answers. So I would start with the first thing, as Rochelle said, ask what support will be helpful to him and see what they need and follow their steps. There are a couple of things in this scenario. The first thing is with the impersonation accounts. Creating reporting is wonderful, but one thing we always advise people before reporting is that to document what is happening so that you can have a proof of whatever that was happening, you can have a proof of it. So documenting it is very important. Reporting it so that it's taken down is super, super important. And not only that I can report, but I can ask others also to report on this person's behalf. And making a post as well to advise of the impersonation is something very important. The only thing I would say is just make sure that you are following the person's lead and checking with them specifically if something that would be public. Reporting is not public. It's not public facing, it's not visible. Making a statement or something like that is a little bit of public statement. So it's important to have to ask the person exactly if they're comfortable with that or not. Document and ensure that I know what other avenues are there to be able to support them. Perfect. Yes. All of this is great. Now, just a quick check in. How are we feeling? Am I going too fast, too slow? Perfect. Let's continue then. Now, let's talk about some preparations for online abuse. Nothing like a lot of the things they always talk about are simple. They take time, I'm not gonna lie. They take time, they take some effort, but it just takes time and effort at the beginning, and then it becomes easier and it becomes more of maintaining them and becomes like a habit for us. And the first thing we talk about is to practice password hygiene. And what we mean by that is first, actually, let me ask you a question. Who here has passwords that are less than 16 plus characters? We can be honest, there is no judgment here. This is why we're doing this workshop. Password less than 16 characters, or having the same password for multiple accounts. So, what we mean by password hygiene is that the password should be 16 plus characters at least. Passphrases are the best. So, you can use poetry, you can use line of your favorite book, a line from a song, whatever. You can make it honestly like as fun as you want it to be. And yes, phrases are good. I really enjoy using the phrases. Phrases are stronger for sure to keep you secure, but it's also fun. You can make it fun. Some people actually use like words of affirmation, like I am beautiful, and then so many numbers and things. So it's like they kind of make it fun for themselves. And the other thing we mean by password hygiene is that unique password. So unique password, so you should not be repeating your password for anything. I will definitely talk about a password manager and I will explain what is a password manager and why they're important. But like for you to use password to have password hygiene is to use unique password for each of your accounts, each of them at least 16 plus characters. And the second thing we talk about is picking difficult answers to security questions. Who here answers their security questions honestly? Your mother's maiden name. What street did you grow up in? The model of your first car, the name of your favorite dog or pet. Who here answers it very honestly? So, the reason why we say not to answer the questions honestly is that a lot of these answers are actually Googleable. What is your mother's maiden name? It is super easy for people to find that. If you use the name of your dog, your pet, as the answer to the security question, and you post a picture with that pet on Twitter for everyone to see or on Facebook for everyone to see, then people can actually know that answer for you. So, what we'd advise is that you answer things that are non Googleable. Honestly, lie to security questions. It's okay. You're not going to harm the computer's feelings, and no one actually cares. What is your favorite pet? Or what was your first pet? A shark. Where do you live? I live in Mars. Actually, no one cares, and it keeps you safe. So, to the point that you said, I tend to use names that are not used officially. If this name is used somewhere online, like if you have nicknames, for example, and you're using that online or it's been posted online and people might have access to it, then they can figure out the answer. This is why we always say, like, make something up or something that is not Googleable at all. The question is now, if I make, let's say we have 10 different accounts and I have to memorize or to know 10 different long, complex, unique passwords and to memorize all of the lies that I will make up to answer the security questions. How can I remember all of that? And this is where password managers come in handy. Password managers are like a vault that save your password or your information there or can actually create passwords for you. And not all password managers are the same or as good. You need to find a password manager that is encrypted. Someone in the chat said that they've been nervous about or been scared to use a password manager. And we get this question a lot, like, what if a password manager is hacked? The thing is, if you're using a password manager that is encrypted, then even if they're hacked, you're not really, like, your information is not compromised because they will need that key to decrypt all of the things. So that's why we always say get a password manager that is encrypted and create a very strong password for that password manager. I don't know if this actually answers your fear of using a password manager or if there is something else you want to elaborate on. I think it was Rini. If you leave it, okay. Perfect. That's great. And the other thing as well, when we talk about preparing for online abuse and some of the digital safety things we can do, is to enable two-factor authentications on as many accounts as possible. Think about your accounts this way. The combination of your username and password is the first lock that you have on your door. Then, if that lock fails, we're kind of in trouble. Someone can open the door and enter your house. What we're trying to do is that when we set up two-factor authentication, is we're adding an additional lock to that door. So if the first one fails, the second one is still working. And there are three ways you can set up two-factor authentication. The first one is using a phone number, your SIM card or SMS, so that you receive an SMS on your phone. And we don't really recommend this method a lot because of something called SIM jacking. And SIM jacking, it's when someone calls your phone company, pretends to be you, and ask them to reroute all traffic to a new phone or a new device. So they will have access to your messages and your calls. There is a way that you can, yeah, it happened to me. It's not really fun at all. It happened to me before. It's not fun to deal with at all. But there are things you can do to protect yourself from SIM jacking. You can call your phone company and ask them to set up a PIN on your mobile account, which means that no one can make any changes to your phone, to your SIM card, without providing that PIN. So you're kind of adding like a password for your SIM card. And I really, really recommend everyone doing that. And now back to the rest of the two-factor authentication. We said the SMS, we don't really recommend it so much. The second method, the most secure method, is to use a physical key. It's called YubiKey. And it's a great method. It's just that, honestly, depending on your risk level, you might not need it. A YubiKey is the physical key that you use and you put it on your laptop, and then it will fill out the passwords for you. It is great. It's the most secure one. It's just that, honestly, it's not needed by everyone. One other, like if you have the highest risk level, I would recommend that. Like, for example, if you're a journalist covering white supremacy, yeah, you might need to use a physical key. Or you like covering corruption or something like that, that could be a good idea. But and the last way, the third way to set up two-factor authentication, which is secure enough and good enough and easy to use, is to use an authentication app like Google Authenticator or Authy. It is an authentication app is a software that generates random numbers that expire. And this is how it's keeping you secure. Who here is using an authentication app actually on their accounts? You do at your organization? Yes, the majority of organizations are now requiring it. University account has one. I really recommend also setting it up on your personal ones, not only on your work ones. Set it up at as many accounts as possible. Perfect. Now, if you go to this account, to this website, how secure is my password? This is actually the wrong link. If you go to this website, how secure is my password? Do not actually enter your actual password, please, but use something that resembles your password. It's, for example, if you're using a four-letter word with five numbers, try to enter something like that and see how long it will take a software to figure out your password. Some people use their birthdays as a password, so try to like input something like this and see how long it will take for it to figure it out. And when we talk about password managers, actually 1Password provides free version for journalists. So if you go to 1Password for journalism or for journalists, they will and send them an email, they will provide you with a free account for 5 years. They're very responsive and very good actually with their customer service. Another thing that we always talk about is, and this is one of the most important things, is that when we do all of these trainings, it is not necessarily about all of the steps that you're going to take. We hope that you can implement all of the things we're talking about. But it is actually, we want to create a shift in how we think about our digital footprint. So we want to shift our mindset so that we want to keep your private life private and your public life public. And what we mean by that is not to have two Facebook accounts or two Instagrams or anything like that. You can, of course, if this is what you want, but it's to be intentional and cautious about what type of information we're posting where. If I'm using my Twitter X account purely for work purposes, then I will not post personal information about myself or pictures with my family and my friends there. I will keep it strictly professional. I can have my own brand and identity, just making sure that I don't post personal compromising information there. Where I live, where I normally hang out, I wouldn't post it there. But if I'm using my Instagram account purely for personal purposes, so I have that one locked down, I have it very private, and I can share there more freely than I would in my public accounts. And we've created this resource, it's called Digital Safety Snacks, 2 years ago, because journalists were worried about the doxing, sorry, they were worried about hacking and doxing leading up to the elections. So this is actually a bite-sized videos that you can follow on your own, follow all of the steps so that you can change your settings in different social media platforms, try to find information about yourself, and also request the removal of information from platforms. Now, when we talk about responding to online abuse, what we mean by that is not to ever enforce the cycle of violence or abuse the abuser. It is how can we feel safe to practice counter speech in a way that is empowering for us. And the first thing we start with is by assessing safety. And here there are a couple of questions that you want to ask yourself or ask a trusted friend or someone that you work with. Do you know your harasser? Especially if this person has a history of erratic behavior or violence. Is the threats that you're receiving direct, specific threats with name, time, place, and this shows the intent and capability. Is the behavior that is happening stalker like course of conduct? And what we mean by that is it repeated surveillance from a platform to another, started on Twitter, then moved to Facebook, then moved to Instagram and LinkedIn. This is a stalker like or course of conduct. Indicia of rationality. And what we mean by that is that the person that is sending you threats or harassing you is not even trying to hide the real name, email, or phone number. This shows that they have no fear of consequences in a way. Then if the online is the online conduct migrating offline. For example, started with a Facebook message or a Facebook comment, and then physical mail or a threatening voicemail. Is there a professional liability? That includes, for example, non-consensual intimate images. If your answer to any of these things is yes, then this might be a time for you to seek support from the police, law enforcement. And the question about law enforcement is always very tricky because we understand that not everyone's relationship to the police is the same. Not everyone feels safe enough to go to the police. But when we're talking about these questions that help you assess the threat, this is a point that it might be needed and helpful for you to go to the police. And you can do that by going with a friend or a trusted colleague or anything like that so that you can feel safer. Now, another thing that we talk about, and I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the scenario, is to document. And what we mean by that is the things that we're receiving. If, for example, if I decide to go to the police or I decide to go to an employer and have a conversation about something that is happening, it is helpful for me to document what I've been receiving in general. And there are multiple ways that you can document the things that you're receiving. There is a very simple way, which is literally taking screenshots of the things, saving them in a folder on your desktop. And there is another way, very in depth, and a lot of people who receive a lot of online harassment, specifically escalating ones, use in depth documentation. They create like a spreadsheet with time, date, the communication, the location, and all of the things that they're receiving. And this helps them keep track. The good thing about documentation is, in general, is that it's helpful if you decide to go to the police. It is helpful as well if things escalate, so that you can have the record. And one thing about the police that I didn't mention earlier is that I know that like there is a big amount of the police is not really trained properly on online abuse and response, but it's still a good idea to go to the police if you can convince them of filing a police report, because it creates paper trail. And creating a paper trail is very important in case you decide to seek a restraining order in the future or anything like that. So just thinking about it, that if you achieve to file a police report, it's actually very helpful. Now, with documentation, there are a couple of things that you want to pay attention to when you're documenting, when you're taking screenshots or anything like that. First, with social media platforms, to capture the username of the person that is sending you the threats and the harassment. The URLs as well are very helpful, specifically archival links if needed. Then screenshots of engagement that, for example, for X or Twitter, that can be something like quote tweets, comments, likes, and things like that. With emails, it is important to save the header that contains the IP address. If you don't know how to find the IP address in any of your emails, literally, if you Google it, if you're using, for example, Gmail, how to find IP address in Gmail, it will show you exactly where. And you make sure to take a screenshot of that and save it. With text, calls, and voicemail, it's important not to forget to capture the date and time, of course, in addition to the number that is sending you the harassment. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the tools that exist within platforms that can help someone navigate online abuse. And here we talk about blocking, muting, and restricting. Blocking, muting, and restricting are features in the platforms themselves. Most platforms have these tools. With blocking, what we mean is that when you block someone, you disrupt any communication between both of you. You stop the communication between both of you. It's good. The only thing about it is that if the person will know that they've been blocked, and if they have a history of escalation, then blocking might not be the best idea at that. Muting is that you will not be able to see what the person is sending you. They will not know that you muted them, but you will not be able to see what's happening. The downside of that is that if the threats escalate, if the harassment escalate to to threats of physical violence, for example, or something like that specific, you will not be able to see it. And one thing we tell people to do is that if they can ask their friends to keep an eye on their behalf on what's happening, if they muted a comment or an account. Restricting is a great tool. Actually, it's kind of a mix between blocking and muting, but it's only available on Instagram. And restricting allows you to not see the communication happening. The person will not know that they've been restricted. No one else will ever know that they're posting all of these things. They can continue posting, but you will not see it and people will not see it. The good thing about restricting is that, specifically in situations like online harassment campaigns and dog whistling, it will be harder for that to happen. So, for example, if someone is trying to ask other people to harm me and they go and comment on my account on Instagram and ask them to harm me, if I restrict them, they will think that everyone can see the comment, but no one actually is. So, it's helpful in mitigating campaigns of harassment. Now, with reporting, we've mentioned reporting earlier in the scenario. And reporting, when you report the content, you're asking the platform to take it down. So, this is why, again, a reminder of how important it is to document whatever you're receiving before reporting it. And with reporting, you can use that in Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And these are some tips to make reporting more efficient. I know that unfortunately, a lot of the times reporting is not helpful and is not really, it doesn't work or it doesn't achieve the goal. But these are some of the tips that might make it a little bit more efficient. If you or someone in management has a direct line to take company contact, please do not be afraid to use it. We found that if you know a human in a social media company, it's more likely for it to be taken down. But before doing that, you have to actually report the content because the first question they ask us is, did the person report the content? And if we say no, then it's like, okay, then let them report and then we can see. But if you report the content and it's not taken down or they didn't accept it, and then we go to someone, it's more likely for it to be effective. Another step is that to use clear and concise language and ideally really specifying what type of community standard this thing is violating. And the last thing is to deploy allies to report abuse and help draw more attention on your behalf. Who here have tried to report content that was successful actually? And how was it successful? What did you do for it to be successful? No one? No one reported anything? Or no one had the luck actually for reporting to be successful with them? I personally had a very mixed experience. Some of them worked and the majority did not. But take support person, a real person helps so much. Yep, definitely that helps a lot. Oh yeah, the follow through is a problem. Success. We actually just published a report called Shouting into the Void that talks about reporting mechanisms in social media platforms and how unsuccessful they are. And we included there some of the advice or tips for social media platforms so that they can make it easier and better for people to report. And one of them is what you mentioned, Celine, that like when you don't see the follow through or success, sometimes also you don't have a record of anything. So this is some of the things that we're trying to advocate for with social media platforms that can be done better. Thank you both for sharing. Now, to the very, very famous question, to feed or not to feed the trolls. And again, as I mentioned earlier, what we mean by feed or not feeding the troll is not engaging with the abuser or the abuse. It is to practice counter speech and feel empowered to say something that we want to say that does not perpetuate the cycle of violence that is happening. And these are some of the reasons why people have chose to not engage at all. When they did the threat assessment that we talked about earlier, they saw that there is a potential for violence more than benefits, and the harasser has a history of escalation. So if a harasser has a history of escalation, then me engaging might mean that this might get worse. So it might not be the best idea then. If you're targeted by a mob or potential bot army, no one will win. You cannot really win against bot army. It is there to waste your time, to waste your energy, and that's it. So you will not really win with that. Another thing is if you're not ready emotionally or psychologically for confrontation, I have been on the receiving end of online abuse multiple times, and sometimes I feel like I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna like I have to stand up against this, and I have this energy, and I want to say all of this and like correct something that is not right and stuff like that. Other times, I want to hide under my blanket and be left alone. So both are fine. Check where you are. And one of the things is that if you're not ready emotionally for or psychologically for confrontation, the trolls sometimes try to get to us and to have us do something wrong, screen or say something, screenshot it, send it to our employers so that they get us fired or in trouble. And we see that happening a lot. So this is why we always say, like, check if you're ready emotionally for confrontation or not. And the last thing is that it might violate your employer's social media policy. So this is very, very important to check. Now, there are many reasons why people choose to engage. First, to fact check false claims, and I will show you a lot of examples of people who have decided to practice counter speech, to correct a false narrative, something like impersonation, or to reject hate and bigotry so that we can feel empowered. Now, these are some of the examples of people who have decided to practice counter speech. Maria Ressa is a wonderful journalist who unfortunately has been receiving a lot of online harassment throughout her career, and she uses her platforms to fact check. And when someone asked her, why are you doing this? Like, why are you spending this time to actually fact check? And her response was, if they're real people, I want to let them know they're being deceived. That's what social media was really made for. Plus, ignoring exponential lies, that doesn't work. So this is one method that Maria Ressa that has decided to use her platforms to practice counter speech and engage. Brandy Zadrozny is a journalist that her name came up with Tucker Carlson, and nothing good came after that. And his fans and his fans and his followers decided to send her a lot of content and a lot of online abuse, unfortunately. Then NBC News has published a statement of support, and this shows the ways we can be allies to each other. And then her colleagues started publishing or tweeting all of the great work that she's doing, how great of a journalist she is, and highlighting her work. There is also another way for people to use to practice counter speech is by practicing creative counter speech. And one of the journalists that we know said that when he receives a lot of hate emails, and he said that one of the things that he did is to respond to the hate email with a picture of a puppy with no words at all, like no context. And he was saying that I think it confuses people so much of that, like, okay, what can I say now? Like, I said all of these horrible things and I just received a picture of a puppy. So there are multiple ways that people do that. I also saw that so many people have used fundraising campaigns and links as a response to abusive comments. And specifically things like, for example, if there is a campaign against a journalist or a writer or something like that, and it is very homophobic, I saw some people posting links to fundraising for nonprofits that work with the LGBT community, and just to also change to break this tension as well. Do you have examples? Both are fine. Sometimes trolls just want the reaction and attention too. Exactly. So feeding them just might aggravate the situation. An example of social media policies that utilize flow charts like what you just presented. So social media policies for organizations, if you can elaborate on that. Also, I don't know, Rochelle, if you can unmute and elaborate more if it's easier. We're building a social media policy at our organization, and I appreciated the chart about responding to online abuse to feed or not to feed. Yeah. Okay, so Rochelle, let me share with you my email. Also, do you mind saying what organization or like what type of organization is that? A media, journalism, nonprofit? What type of organization is it? Charity. Okay. Okay, so this is my email. You can reach out. You can send me an email or reach out to me, and I can definitely have a conversation. We actually help a lot of organizations and newsrooms with their social media policies in general. So I would be happy, me or my colleagues, to have a conversation with you about that. Um, Now, when we talk about support and allyship, when preparing for online abuse, how do we prepare for online abuse when it comes to support and allyship? One thing that we can do is to establish a supportive cyber community. And this can look like a rapid response team. The name sounds complicated, but it really isn't. It's just having 3 to 5 people, for example, trusted people that you have in your life, friends, colleagues, in a shared channel. It can be WhatsApp, can be Signal, email, whatever it is, that you reach out to each other if something is happening. Because online abuse tend to be very isolating and traumatizing, and just having access to that can be very, very helpful. Another thing is to like build a larger cyber community. And this can be so many things. A lot of us have been in fellowships, internships, work, different online platforms, your friends and family, publishers, editors, followers, anything that we can reach out to help us if something is happening. And then using these 2 different platforms, we can actually tell people how can they help us. So we can call on them on the cyber community to support us or do something specific that we need. Here we have a sample text, for example. Followers of my blog are being drowned out by trolls flooding the comment section with rape threats. I believe in my work, but I need a break from these attacks. If you're willing to lend a hand as a guest moderator, please DM me. This is a very specific, simple text that we can tell people how can they better support us and what type of help that we need. And what can allies do? This is very important when we're responding to online abuse. If I am in the middle of an online abuse attack, what can allies do to help me? There are so many things. First, honestly, checking in on the person is the most important thing. In doing this work, we found that the psychosocial support that people need can really, really make a really great change in someone's life. So just checking in on the person, checking in on them and seeing what they need. Bring chocolate, coffee, wine, tea, whatever it is, and ask them how can you help them is something very helpful. And these are also some of the very practical things that you can provide. Monitoring, reporting, and documenting on social media on their behalf that can be extremely helpful so that they can take a break from all of the things that they're receiving. Another thing as well is that amplifying original posts or chiming in on conversations that are constructive. So, one of the things that trolls try to do is to hide the great work that someone is doing and make the abuse the trending topic. But if we can amplify each other's work, the original posts or the original work that we've done, that would be actually very helpful for people. Another thing is to rally supportive community. And what we mean by that is if I have a very high number of followers that I can ask them to support someone else, that would be great. Specifically, for example, in reporting content. So the more people report content, the more likely it is to be taken down. So this is one thing that you can do. Another thing is to reclaim a negative hashtag or flood it with positive messages, or as I showed in the last slide, puppy pictures as well. And reclaiming a negative hashtag, it happened a couple of years ago with the Proud Boy hashtag. And the Proud Boy is a white supremacist extremist group that used Proud Boy hashtag on Twitter to harm some people. But then members of the LGBTQ community overtook or reclaimed that hashtag and shared a lot of pictures of love and queer love. And it was just very wonderful thing to happen. And then the last thing is to leverage influence, privilege, or power. That includes if you can fact check false claims, if you have connections with someone in social media platforms that can help with taking down content, all of these things you can do as an ally. So other things, vigilante reporting. Sometimes whenever I'm scrolling in the different social media platforms and I see someone struggling with online abuse, I just report the content because this is something that is not visible, it's not public, but it's also very helpful. For anything else that is not reporting, please, please, please make sure to check in with the target first. As I said, some people might want the support, and some people might just want this to go away. Like it will take a day or two, whatever it is, and it will go away. So check in with the individual and follow their lead. And just be ready. If you ever decide to take a public stance or do something that is public and visible with the consent of the other of the target, please make sure to be ready because you might be a target yourself. So check your cybersecurity and the information about you online as well. I want to pause before we go to this section and check how we're doing and if there is any questions about the previous section. Perfect. I'm glad that you found the practical examples helpful. Perfect. Okay, so I'm actually going super fast because I want to leave us time at the end for questions if there is any. So we can now continue with mental health and wellness. Whenever I talk about mental health and wellness, it's actually for me, I cannot like there are so many things on the screen now that you can see. Writing, massages, music, nature, walking, meditation, deep breathing. There are so many things. But the thing is, there is no right or wrong answers for this. One type of self-care might not actually work for someone and might be the perfect thing for another. For me, and it makes my friends laugh all the time, deep breathing stresses me out. So when someone is telling me to take deep breaths, I get stressed out. Like it's not really helpful for me. So for me, I know that this is not something that I do. But for other people, it's actually very, very helpful. So the thing is to honestly find whatever works for you, adapt it and do it and make sure to dedicate the time for it. One thing on the screen that I would highlight for everyone and anyone is to turn off your phone if possible, specifically notifications and specifically at night. Taking a break from our devices, specifically that these devices we see all of this abusive content on, is something that is very, very helpful. What self care tips and things that you do that you find helpful that might not be on the screen? Or honestly, it can be also on the screen. One thing that is not on the screen that is helpful for me is dancing. And it helps me engage my body and like just be present. Visiting with family, I love that. Yes. Surrounding yourself with the love of family, friends, or pets is a wonderful thing to do. Thank you, Celine. Now, that being said, the things that self care is different from a person to another. Chat with a friend and debrief. Pet, definitely. Oh, yeah, for sure. um, there are a couple of things that you want to pay attention to. And if you see them happening and persisting, this is when to consider getting professional help. I also know that therapy might not be for everyone, whether for financial reasons, because it is definitely expensive, or for cultural reasons. But there are some symptoms that we see that might be a good idea for you to seek professional help. That can include if you're consistently paralyzed by fear and cannot complete normal day-to-day tasks, if you talk about your cyber abuse almost constantly, even to strangers, if you're having difficulty sleeping or eating, if you cannot enjoy your daily life activities, if you're feeling of hopelessness and depression remain, even after cyber abuse has ended, all of these things might be signs that you might need to seek professional help. And all of this is actually very normal and natural to feel in the middle of an attack or right after an attack. What we're talking about, if these things persist and remain several weeks after an attack, then this might be a good idea to seek professional help at that moment. And I am someone that believes in therapy so much, and I love my therapist and I'm going to therapy, and it has helped me through a lot, specifically also with online abuse. So I really, really encourage that if it's something that you can do. So, just to recap quickly, what's one thing you will take away with you today from this session? All the information about password protection for my personal work accounts. Perfect. The most impactful consideration is that we don't have to navigate online harassment alone. We can set up support system. Yes, 100%. 100%, yes. Online abuse is actually meant to be isolating and for people to feel that they're alone. So this is very important. What I can do to support friends, colleagues, and our organization if we are the target of online abuse. Perfect. Now, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and have a conversation together and answer any questions that you may have. I wanted to make sure that we have time at the end, proper time at the end for questions. Oh, yes. Let me share with you some resources. This is our programs front page, and then we have this is the last report we published, which was I was talking about shouting into the void. It's really it's in depth about reporting mechanisms on social media platforms. And this is the link to the digital safety snacks. If anyone wants to follow step by step how to protect yourself from hacking and doxing as well. And I can also share with you the Coalition Against Online Violence, which is a hub of now, I think, over 80 organizations. And they have a lot of resources that can help navigating online abuse as well. Hello.
Yeah, we have like a bit of a strange question, and hopefully it won't be too much off topic because I know this is more like online abuse, and a lot of what you cover seem to be things like bots or spamming your inbox or your DMs. But I actually have a different one that's a little bit off, but it kind of goes with the theme of today with gender-based violence. Is that there's applications out there, say for instance, down in the States, and we heard about this a lot this year, like people trying to go for running, like a woman trying to go for a run at like 4 a.m. gets murdered, and it was like all over the news, and it was terrible. And like I'm part of the running community, and like we use apps to like showcase our runs and talk to each other, and it's actually being misused
Yes.
by stalkers who are now like following people and knowing where they live, following where they like to run, and like finding them and harassing them in person. So it's going from online to in person. And for people who use like apps like that, where like their location might be revealed or where they live, and it's like, it just is another like, and it's, you know, now becoming an issue. Like people are being followed on their runs. People are finding their stalkers at home or at work, like confronting them. So do you have tips maybe for, and like, and I know this might not be quite on this topic, but like this was something I was a little bit interested about too, because like I've had so many friends tell me about like their
Yeah.
how they don't feel safe using these platforms anymore, and yet they like have to remove themselves from like using apps that are supposed to celebrate like their
Yeah.
fitness or like interact with other runners, and or in general, like there's apps out there that do these kind of things. So yeah, do you have any like tips for folks? Like I know there's one thing
Sure.
that this app has done to like block off where you start and end, but it still shows like in general a general area
Yeah.
where you are.
So for me, I am more of on the paranoid side about sharing information in general. And
Mm-hmm.
kinda because of the nature of the work that I used to do and I do now as well. I was a journalist covering human rights abuses in Egypt. So that was a huge risk being a journalist doing that work there. And now working in the safety and security, a lot of people get pissed off. But for me, one of the things is that anything related to physical locations, I really recommend not sharing in general. So I think you can still use the apps just without sharing your routes and where you're running. And it happened like this is actually unfortunately it's happening more and more now because of like sharing the path, the exact path. Like one of the things, for example, I tell my friends is that don't save your home on Google Maps as home, specifically if you don't have strong passwords and your Google accounts were hacked. Like, I really recommend that people don't share and label things the way they are. Like, for example, some people have, because like when you're in a car, for example, and you're like home, so that like the GPS takes you to home.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I get worried with something like this. Like, this is information that someone else can have access to if this account is hacked. So, anything related to physical locations, I always recommend that people do not share online. You can still use the applications, but not the full features of the applications if possible. I wish the answer was better and the situation was better, actually.
No, and isn't it interesting that like on apps like this, or any like apps like you were saying that give out location settings, like it's usually those who are, you know, cis women or women identifying that have to take those precautions, and it's kind of a little bit sad that that's the state of things, but
Yeah.
like I feel like yeah, we have to be even more careful
Yeah.
because we're more the target.
Women and non-binary individuals and anyone that is from marginalized communities, they really have to change, unfortunately, have to take a lot of precautions on any things that they're doing online. Because the sharing of information, I always think about it this way. It's like a puzzle, and we share this tiny piece of information on Facebook, this tiny piece of information on LinkedIn and on Instagram. If someone is determined enough to harm me, they can put all of these pieces together and have a bigger picture about my life and a lot of information that I would not like them to have. So I'm always very cautious about it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, because I mean, it just takes a little bit of effort. I mean, sometimes you don't find, but you know, you find affiliations. Like maybe
Yes.
you've given your email because you're on the board and they publish it on their website, and but you don't give out your personal email to anybody else. But somehow someone's got suddenly your personal
Yeah.
email is now spamming you because they found you randomly. So as much as we think we're protecting ourselves, I feel like we just have to be
Yeah.
so careful how and how much info we give away
And
now.
something very important you just said, Jessica, is like the email or the phone, for example. In one of our other trainings, we talk about the different ways you can actually separate your personal and professional life. And it is to have, we always recommend people to have at least three different emails: one that is personal, one that is work, professional, and one for spam. So that you can subscribe to things and get discounts from Macy's or from whatever. So just like to have them separated so that your personal, not to be given to anyone, just for personal uses, for your bank accounts, your family and friends, for whatever associated with the medical records at the hospital and stuff like that. And then you have the work professional one that can be given away as like, this is my work email. Like, this is the one that will be public facing. And then the spam one is just for subscriptions, for social media as well. Like, we use it for social media separate and for subscriptions, stuff like that. And a similar thing to your phone number, to have two separate ones, one for personal and one for professional. And there are many ways people can do that. You can create a Google Voice account, a virtual number, that you can use for work. And this is actually what I'm doing. Like my virtual Google Voice number is for my work, and my personal one is a different one. And the personal one, only family and friends have. That's it.
I think that's a great point. I will say I have like 5 email addresses for that exact reason,
Perfect.
because it helps you separate a bit, and then you can be very choosy on what you give. And I know that's something you brought up, kind of boundaries, and I love that you brought up like boundaries, and also like just like the personal phones, because I think that's something like our organization sometimes struggles with. We do get calls and social media um,
Request.
contacts at all hours, and we're still developing that. But I think that's something you really touched on well, is like just drawing those boundaries. And I know we kind of set up like an automated message of like, hey, we may not respond after this time, or
Yeah.
just thanks for contacting us, we'll get back to you within 24 hours, just so that people aren't sending
Yes.
20 messages, and they know like, oh, I've messaged you at midnight, like, because we have seen people abuse that and say like, why aren't you answering me? And we're like, because it's 11:30 at night, we're sleeping, like, please let us get back to you tomorrow. And then after we say that, we get 30 more messages of like, well, this is my issue. And you're like, so you're kind of, and in our work too, like people are sometimes calling in crisis and needing resources
Yes.
immediately. And so there's a balance to be found, and it's sometimes really difficult for our team, because like our team is so compassionate.
Yes.
Sometimes they want to answer and they get sucked in, and then they feel like they can't say, because they've already killed that boundary. They've already stepped over it, and they've already decided they're going to negate it by interacting with the individual. So I think it's good to have boundaries, but it's hard to enforce
It
sometimes.
is very hard to enforce. Me and my team were learning more and more how to say no, or at least not now. It's hard if you work in kind of emergency response and in a profession that is responding to emergencies and crises and all of these things. But at the same time, it's also a faster way to burn out if you don't have boundaries. And when the whole team is in burnout, then who can help who? Like it's gonna be hard. So we always remind each other, and we try to hold each other accountable to saying no, or to just saying that, like, okay, these are the times, let's talk then, for example.
We have a phrase that we say often, is that we're not doctors,
We're
and
not doctors.
we're not
Thank
ER. Like,
you.
we're not in
Yep.
the ER. Like, we have to be respectful of ourselves too. And
Yep.
yeah, like as much as we want to help, it sometimes too people are like, well, I need all this, and we're like, well, nothing opens till 9 a.m. So me talking to you at 2 a.m., I can't do anything to solve this issue immediately. But when working hours, we can get on and we can help. But I get it, because we also recognize like folks sometimes are at work all day, and then this is the only time
Yep.
they can be on. So like you said, it's finding that balance and recognizing like, what can I do in this moment, but also protecting yourself. And I'm glad you brought up burnout, because it's a very evident thing that happens, especially for
Yeah.
folks. So yeah, no, thank you. I'm going to
Of
be
course.
quiet, and hopefully maybe somebody else will have a question, but if not, like, I've just appreciated this, because yeah, we have a similar thing with our organization called Social Stride, and we talk about online abuse and such too. And I know there's sessions happening today, but like this was nice just to see some of the practical examples, and to see it a little bit in the similar method of ours.
I
So,
was actually part of Social Stride last year in a panel.
oh wow, oh
Yes.
I should probably know it. I'm like, I knew your name sounded familiar. But yeah, I feel like some of the learnings you're using is some of the stuff that we've integrated into ours, just to help our team too. So it's amazing that you're sharing these resources with folks, because this is like the age of technology now, I feel like.
Oh, it is. It's scary, but it's also empowering. I think there's a lot of things we can do. Uh, because as much of things we're talking about as in trouble and problems, it is really helpful. And a lot of these, it's more of like knowing that we have control and we can do things to protect ourselves and respond in a way that protects our well being and our mental health while being visible. Because a lot of our jobs require us to be visible, requires us to be online, building our profile, building our brand, but we can do both. I see a comment in the chat. It is so true. The amount of people I know who are whether quitting social media or actually journalism industry is really scary. Specifically, like one of the reasons why I really believe in this work is that online abuse affects all of our efforts in diversity because statistically it's shown that people from specific marginalized communities are targeted more by online abuse. And all of if all of our efforts to have inclusion and diversity and all of that, but not supporting the staff or the people when they're facing online abuse, people will end up leaving. And we will end up losing a lot of incredible talents. And it's sad. So it's true, Chelsea, to what the point you said. It's opting out completely is something that is happening and is very dangerous.
I was actually even thinking, and journalism must be so scary because you're already putting yourself in so many situations that can be physically dangerous for you, as well as emotionally and mentally as well, depending on like what context you're going into and what situation. So I can only imagine, but you did bring up something there that I was just thinking about too, even with our, like, you know, with communication staff. I've actually heard more of them saying, I keep a very low profile. And they don't even want to be on like our staff website sometimes, or they don't want their picture shown because they're just like, no, it's an identifier. Like, I just want to be really low profile. So you're right. Like, people are opting out or they're removing themselves off social media. And I'm seeing this with like digital content creators, even the good ones who are just like out there trying to promote good content or,
Yeah.
you know, trying to be emotionally supportive and be like, I'm just trying to create happy content or real content, and you're seeing people just attack them. So I can't even imagine how it must feel for some of these folks in the marginalized communities that don't even know what to do in these situations, or for journalists. So I guess my question following up is like, if you could wave a magic wand and say, because I feel like individuals are taking accountability, but maybe policymakers or tech companies aren't looking into this like they should be. So if you can wave a magic wand and say, like, what is one action that like could be put into policy, or what do you think people should be, or agencies that should be focusing on to support people and like navigate this issue?
I think with policy is very tricky because one of the concerns that we have, again, I work from a free expression organization, and one of the concerns that we always have when it comes to policy is that in the majority of instances, policy that is proposed has bad consequences of free speech. So we need to find a balance between that, like what type of policy that someone can propose that wouldn't actually suppress freedom of expression. So this is a concern. That's why with policy, I'm honestly even not sure. With other actors, this is part of the work that we do, is that we advocate with both employers and social media platforms. Like part of our job is, or part of our work is actually self-defense, which is directed towards individuals so that they can better support themselves and navigate some like online abuse when it happens. But we also believe on the systemic change. Like we need to change things on a systemic level. And that includes advocating and working with employers, whether they are newsrooms, publishing houses, nonprofits, so that they can set up best practices and policies to support their staff and freelancers in a way that is holistic and not traumatizing, and also at the same time not ad hoc. And with social media platforms, we do a lot of research on how social media platforms can do better. How can they think of the features and tools that they have and center safety when they're doing that. So it's both. We do believe that we cannot really solve this issue in a way that is one faceted.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I don't think this is something we're going to solve, but I do feel like with the technology advances that are happening so quickly, like now we have AI where it can steal your face, it can steal your voice, it can scam people, and it can hurt you, it can steal your identity, it can do all kinds of things. So there's so much. And then there's just, again, all that, the racial issues, the horrible hate that comes through and the emotional toll it takes on folks. So yeah, you're right. Like it's not something that is solved just with a policy. It really takes the individual actors to be able to support each other and like say, okay, like as a team, we're here for you. And these are the supports available to you, because oftentimes, you know, something goes online or something is said and they get a huge amount of backlash, and they always say no press is bad press, but it is. And it is the people that are involved and the people that are posting, and then they say, well, you handle it. And it's like, I just was the messenger. Like, what do you want me to do about this? So I know we're like, and I'm talking on more an organization level than maybe like in a minority, because yes, I am a white settler, and so I'm not privy to that kind of thing. But as a person that is cis women, I do deal with just more that issue. So I'm more looking at this as like an organization and my own identity as a. I know so many like that there's so many other issues going on for them.
It all matters. And also, like, it's honestly very important to think about it also from an organizational level, because that also acknowledges that there is a problem and that the staff or the people can be facing this and thinking about the issue and like, how can you support? So all of this is wonderful. It's very, very helpful.
All right. Well, I'm going to be quiet. Maybe there's someone else who wants to chime in. I feel like I've kind of taken this over and I don't want to be that person. So if anybody else wants to, please chime in. Or if you want to share your audio visual, there's a button up top that says request to share audio and visual. And we can always put you on here if you feel comfortable. If you don't, that's okay. I'm going to be quiet now.
And if there is no more questions, we can definitely let you go early. So it's up to you. Now again, I'm sharing. Oh, yeah, that is a big problem actually with social media policies and organizations. So we have, I will share my email with you. You can reach out to me because this is part of what we do. But we didn't share here social media policies, but it is a problem. And we're trying to advocate with a lot of organizations on first, the social media policy should be clear on what is expected from people to be done or not done, but also like understanding that the parameters around it. And it is a very tricky question because newsrooms, for example, or journalism institutions will not have the same standard as nonprofits. So the conversation shifts massively from an organization to another, depending on the work that we're doing. With newsrooms, we find it harder for social media policies to navigate social media policies within newsrooms than it is with other nonprofits. So it depends on the type of work that the organization is doing, the conversation shifts. But I would be happy to have to talk more about it for sure with you. Thank you. Any last questions? Should we let people go earlier, a little bit earlier?
Yeah, sorry, I was just answering our team on a call. I think if you feel like you're done, maybe just put your website on one more time, just in case anyone wants to check out those resources. I know you shared your email, but this was great. Like like I said, our team's got the social stride stuff, but I love when it's presented from this viewpoint, and I always feel like we learn more all the time, even when we think we're knowledgeable. There's always something that comes up. And you brought up just so many different points, especially around like the journalism. The journalism is not something I think about very often, but it's definitely a highlight when people are in such the public eye or involved in media. So
thank you so much, Jessica. This has been wonderful, and thank you so much for the conversation and your questions. Really appreciate it. them.
I try, because sometimes people are shy, you know, they just kind of want to come and absorb the material, and then it's like, oh, what's a good thought-provoking question? So hopefully it was okay. But no, we're thankful for you sharing, because like I was saying, it's an age of technology, and there's just, there's so much potential for abuse. So this was amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.